Nobody owes you anything for slavery. If you want to tell the truth about it, it is you who owes. It's you who owes.
That's North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson telling the black community that we must pay for the sins of slavery.
People talk about reparations. Reparations. You know who owe reparations? We do.
Mark Robinson doesn't speak for us, nor does he stand with us. And if you want to know the truth about it, he owes us an apology. Paid for by Progress NC Action.
WECU Awesome Radio, 107.5 FM and 1570 AM. WECU 1570 AM and W298BX 107.5 FM, Winterville, North Carolina.
Motivations with Glenn.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Awesome Radio, WECU, 1570 AM and 107.5 FM, WECU, the Awesome Radio Network. You are tuned into the Glenn Johnson Show, Motivations with Glenn and Apostle Jacqueline Cullins Williams. We have a very, very important topic of discussion today. That is child abuse and neglect, as well as domestic violence, and also have a document concerning the North Carolina legislation and statutes on fines and penalties and convictions and so on and so forth. All happening now here on the Glenn Johnson Show, Motivation with Glenn and Apostle Jacqueline Cullins Williams. Here is Apostle Jacqueline Cullins Williams, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, Dr. Glenn, and to our listening audience on today, we are glad to be here. This is a very sensitive, and it can be a touchy subject, and it could be a subject that a lot of people interpret it their own way. They can do it. People, they have their own mindset concerning it. They have their own opinion concerning it, and some people say it's none of your business.
Yeah, and you know why it's so sensitive? Because if a child has been abused, that child has no inclination that they are being abused.
Definitely. A lot of times the environment is conducive and the children are trained in such a way that they may not even realize that what is happening to them is abuse. And especially in places where children are secluded and they're not allowed to talk to other people, they're not allowed to have relationships with other people. Those particular environments can be very, very conducive, or they can promote being a place where children can be abused.
That's right. Because they might think it's normal, a normal thing, because they don't know any alternative or anything other than that, because they were raised in that environment.
Yes, which is definitely an issue, especially when kids are in seclusion a lot. They may not learn the same things that other kids learn, especially when they have been brought up and they have been trained from a very young age to not talk, to not tell things, and to not reveal the truth. And they have also been kept in a place where they're not given information where they can know what abuse is. So this subject today, and there is no wrong and no right way. We are going to just define some things that we have on paperwork here that defines what abuse is. There can be a lot of gray areas, I understand, and neither one of us are experts, or we don't work for social services or any of those things. And some people consider abuse, other people may not. Some things can be cultural, and so we have to look at that aspect of things. And some things can be traditional, how people were raised. This is how I was raised. And others, they'll take the opinion of, never doing certain types of things of abuse, and only correcting with words, and others do time out. So, Dr. Glenn, this is a whole, we could have a bunch of little sub topics on that, and I'm going to start by asking you, do you believe in timeout?
No.
I'm going to say this, a lot of people of certain races, they don't believe in timeout.
But you know what's interesting, what you just said? It might be cultural, it might be traditional, but for those individuals, they have to realize or recognize that now they're in another country. And if you're here in North Carolina, it is illegal for some of that activity to take place. If you will go to that first document, domestic violence, child abuse, and neglect laws, if you will go to the second statute, if you would just read that for me, please.
Dr. Glenn, give me just 1 second. I am coming after it. I see it here. The second statute?
Yeah, NCGS 14-318-2. That's NCGS stands for North Carolina General Statute.
And it says, it is a crime for a parent of a child under 16 years or a person caring for or supervising a child to inflict physical injury, allow physical injury to be inflicted, or to create a risk of physical injury to a child in a way other than accidental means. Unlike the prior statute section, this crime only applies to a parent or caregiver, it is a Class A1 misdemeanor offense, which is the most serious misdemeanor offense.
Yeah, although it's a misdemeanor, it is serious because it involves a child. So I'm glad they added that part to it. Although it's a misdemeanor, it is quite serious.
So it says that it's a crime to inflict physical injury. And I think that word there, injury, needs to be interpreted where the problem is. I don't think it says that it's a problem to discipline a child, and even for those people that believe in spanking. And so question number 2, Dr. Glenn, I'm going to ask you, do you believe in spanking or not spanking?
Let me look at that. Let me see.
Because a lot of people...
Well, I think you will actually get the attention of the child if you spank them.
You spank them. I believe, Dr. Glenn, in a mixture of both. I do believe in some timeout and some other forms of besides spanking, and maybe because I was a soft-hearted parent. I had one that did spank. The ex-husband, he did spank, but I didn't spank that often. Every blue moon, but I didn't. I just like to do the punishment and not time out all the time. But I've learned to do it, in my profession, a time away, or a time to rethink, or a time to refocus, or, have them go to their room. If that's how you were able to do it, I would take things away too.
I didn't get spankings. I was tore up from the floor up. My mom didn't hesitate to take the curtains off the curtain rods. I'm like, what are you decorating? She said, oh yeah, I'm about to decorate something. And then you go next door to your grandma, she gonna be waiting for you, because she had more stuff. I got to my grandmother's house, opened the door. She came to the door with boxing gloves on. I said, Lord have mercy. Because my grandma, she was my grandfather's wife, who was a minister, and she didn't play either.
Well, and some of that, Dr. Glenn, may be because you were male. You were a male, you know,
Well, I know that's what it was.
and that could be a lot of it. You know, the difference between how they were disciplining boys versus girls, you know, and they may have felt like, you know, sometimes, especially when they're male, they try to bristle up and try to talk back and try to get bad with you, you know, gonna act like they're gonna do something. And so sometimes, especially when, you know, males are younger, especially in households where there is a single parenting, where there's a female, they may have to be a little tougher.
I am the man I am today because of all the beatings I inflicted or got inflicted on me by my mom. Because that made me a better person. That made me realize, comprehend things a lot better from those beatings. Trust me. I've got 1 minute to go, but let me just tell you this. I had gotten suspended from school. I was in elementary school. So they called me to the principal's office. They gave me a letter to take home to my mom. And I thought about it walking home. I said, I can't give her this letter. There's no way. So I took that letter and threw it in this lady's yard. The problem I had was I forgot that lady worked for the school board. She hand delivered it to my mom at the front door. And the only thing I remember after that is everything turned dark.
You got caught, and no matter what.
Man, it was the worst beating I ever got.
And that's what kids don't understand. They can't get away all the time. Eventually, you're going to get caught. And I'm going to tell you, when we come back from our particular break here, Dr. Glenn, a story about my cousins and what we decided to do with our report card one time. And yeah, they got me caught.
I can imagine. But I just wanted to share that with you because my mom, being a Christian lady and the daughter of a Baptist minister, she never did use 1 ounce of profanity a day in her life. If she said, ain't that a blip? When we heard blip, we knew there was some trouble about to happen. That's the only thing she would say, ain't that a blip? So we knew what blip meant.
Yeah, they used to use substitute words. They didn't cuss like that.
Yeah, blip meant go sit down somewhere. I'm about to come get you. We heard that word, we all shot out of the house.
Definitely. Dr. Glenn, we're getting ready to go for our first break, but we're going to admonish our viewers and listeners to come back and let's get into this subject. And they can also call in. Awesome Radio, 107.5 and 15.7 on the AM dial.
Back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen.
My name is Jayla, and you're to see to my papa, Glenn Johnson, on the ready.
From the Pacific Justice Institute, this is The Legal Edge, defending your rights as a Christian, a parent, and a citizen. Here's Brad Dacus.
For over 2 decades, Pacific Justice Institute has been dedicated to providing people of faith with exceptional legal support when their religious freedom is threatened. Currently, PJI is seeking attorneys or individuals with paralegal experience to join our committed legal team positioned nationwide. Our goal, folks, is to defend the religious freedoms of those who are under attack and unable to defend themselves. Learn more about joining our team and apply today by submitting your resume and cover letter on pji.org.
PJI provides legal representation without charge. Get exclusive email updates by registering for the Legal Insider at pji.org.
Attention, powerful women. Unleash your inner boss and walk into your blessings. Mark your calendars because Nakisha Williams proudly presents the No Pain, No Gain Women Boston Blessed Up Conference 2024. Sunday, August 18th at the Greenville Convention Center. It's the Double You Can't Stop Me edition with 2 powerhouse keynote speakers. The dynamic Bishop Vance Old, Grammy and Stellar Award winner Erica Campbell. Performing live, Corinne Hawthorne. And Zacardi Cortez. Experience soul-stirring messages from Chanel Monique Lee, Deja Fullmore, and prophetess Jacqueline London. This conference will leave you forever changed. Hosted by visionary Keisha Williams and comedian Akita B. No Pain, No Gain. Women Boston Blessed Up Conference 2024, where the devil can't stop you and the blessings await. Sunday, August 18th. Doors open at 2 p.m. Show starts at 3. Vendor space available and early bird tickets for just $65 at NakishaMWilliams.com. a.m.
You're listening to 107.5 FM and 1570 AM WECU.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Glenn Johnson Show, Motivations with Glenn and Apostle Jacqueline Collins Williams, here on WECU, 1570 AM and 107.5 FM, Awesome Radio Network. We're going to continue our topic, but I did meant to mention something at the top of the hour, and that is Military Appreciation Month. May is Military Appreciation Month, a special time for those in and out of the military. It is a time designated to honor and recognize the contributions, sacrifices, and service of the members of the armed forces past and present. Included in the Military Appreciation Month is also Military Spouse Appreciation Month Day, because the spouses play an important role in this too. While the husband may be deployed, what are they doing on the base or their residence, and doing various activities to help these service members? Jack, if you would get that document. And then we'll get back into the child neglect, child abuse, and domestic violence.
Military Appreciation Month, 2024. And it definitely, Dr. Glenn, was there something you wanted me to read?
If you go to the second page and just mention the military appreciation for as far as the spouse is concerned.
In military, and I do know a little bit about it. I was a military spouse.
I thought so. That's why I figured I'd give that to you.
Years ago, I was a military spouse. So I'm familiar, and I have a couple of kids that were born in the military. They call them military brats, and they still call themselves today military brats. We lived on a military base, so I knew a lot about it in my younger years. So Military Spouse Appreciation Day, and it says, what is Military Spouse Appreciation Day? Military Spouse Appreciation Day is a day set aside for us to pause and recognize the military spouses around us who have the greatest impact on our lives and our military communities. And that is something, especially when it is the spouse is female. And there are some spouses that are male. Yeah. So we can't differentiate with that, because there are a lot of male that the wife is in the military and the husband is not.
And I know that military spouses, if on base, they have a lot of special activities that they involve themselves with. They will get other wives together and have different groups that would meet to help do various things around the base. I know from experience that there was a spouse group that made, I think it was bags. They made bags out of old military surplus stuff. And they was able to sell some of those bags online to help support the troops.
And they also have their own celebrations within their units. Different units will sponsor, they'll have like big picnics and different things, that involve the family, where you can bring your children out, and, they will have a big barbecue and those type of things, Dr. Glenn. So this says Friday in May before Mother's Day. That's the day. Friday in May before Mother's Day is the particular day. And so there's a lot of festivities that go around with that. And it's a great responsibility being the spouse of a military personnel, because of the fact that you are their greatest support. Your activity or your involvement in their life can help them to go forward, and it can also halt them and cause them to be stagnant. That's or right. To have some troubles,
And just like the military personnel, serving would say, well, he's my brother. This is my brother. It's a family. And the same thing applies to the spouses. They're all a family.
That's right. And not only that, as the soldier gets up early, a lot of times you got to get up early with them too. That's right. You got to be right on them, supporting them to make sure that they have things together for themselves and the things that they need.
I think on the negative side of it, I don't want to mention anything negative, but I think a lot of spouses go through various situations where the husband might be deployed, but because of, what's that word? Because of where he's been deployed, he can't mention anything about the operation. So I know a lot of spouses have difficulty with that.
Yes, and that's a part of what it is. When you're in that community, you live like that. So you already know there's classified things that they're not going to tell you. I mean, there's some general things they could say to you, but if there's something, you know what I mean, that's specifically that they can't, they just don't mention it. But, and being separated is hard in itself. I
Yeah.
can talk about some things because I know I've been through it, with deployment, and I'm thinking it was Desert Storm, that my ex was deployed during that time, and I had a newborn baby. Those are the things that are hard.
And I just remember the name that they call that. If you may remember, is it Op 4? I think it's Op 4, where the husband is not allowed to say anything about the mission. You have to abide by the rules under Op 4.
I don't know, Dr. Glenn. They just didn't talk about it. They didn't give it a name. They just say we're operating under this. They just didn't tell us whatever it was.
Yeah, they operate under certain criteria, and if I'm not mistaken, it's Op 4. But if there's a military person listening that could clarify that or verify that, please don't hesitate to call in 252-756-2008. We'll get back to our topic on child neglect and abuse and domestic violence. Jackie.
Yes. And so, Dr. Glenn, I asked one of my colleagues today, and I said to him, what is the hardest abuse and neglect that you see that is overlooked or that is hard to detect? And this particular colleague works in the social services, works with social services department. And so she said to me that one of the hardest things to spot with child abuse and neglect is verbal abuse. And I tend to agree with that. The other things, they have physical scars, and they may have the other forms of abuse may have things that you could see or tell on the outside. But when it comes to verbal abuse, it's one of the ones that can be hidden. It can have lifelong consequences. Sometimes people have to go, even after being an adult, and get therapy, from some of the verbal abuse and the things that were said to them. And I think a lot of parents don't look at it. They were raised up, being called names, and they turn around as a parent, and that's how they did. They called names, or they verbally attacked the child and said negative things about them. Instead of building the child up, they were tearing them down. Yeah. And I think it's a very, very a place where people need to be very, very careful with how you use your words and what you declare over a child.
Yeah, and I think that a child in that situation doesn't have the mentality to articulate that to another individual to seek help. They just don't have that articulate a way to articulate that verbally to another person because it's something that was new to them that they never experienced before.
And they keep it inside, and it just becomes a part of them. And sometimes as an adult, it's something they have to fight. They have to go to therapy and have to be delivered from. If you tell a child that they're ugly every day, or that, calling the child ugly, I mean, maybe the child is ugly to you, but that does not mean that the child is ugly. And what you consider in your mind that might be ugly, the child grows up and they're drop dead gorgeous. They're a model, some modeling company and got a big contract, but you were calling them ugly.
Yeah, we have 1 minute before we go to the next break. And when we come back, I would like to go over every child deserves to be loved. Our children in brain injury, such as shaken baby syndrome. And as always, help available. We'll get to those documents once we come from the break. So we have 1 minute to go, Jackie.
Definitely, Dr. Glenn. We're going to go out. We want you to come on back and hear these good things that we have. And you can also call in. Dr. Glenn, can you give us that number? We never gave out the number today.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to offer a comment or question, please don't hesitate to call in to 252-756-2008. If you would like to avail yourself to any of the doctors that we have, please email me at Glenn, Glenn Johnson, show@gmail.com. If you're online right now, looking at this on Facebook Live or what have you, I have included my email and other information in the chat box. Ladies and gentlemen, so keep it locked right here to Awesome Radio, WECU, 107.5 FM, 1570 AM, Awesome Radio and the Awesome Radio Network. 10 seconds, Jackie.
Yes, come on right back. and we got some good things still lined up for you. We're excited about it, and we look forward to you coming back. We'll be right back in a few minutes. Hang in there with us.
Back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Awesome Radio.
You're listening to the Anchorberg Minute.
The Lord knows us, and his desire for us is to know him. Instead of being disappointed at our brokenness, he is compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, and abounds in loving kindness. Instead of pushing us away, God the Father draws us close through his Son's cross. Instead of shame, he has removed our transgressions as far as the east is from the west. How can we ever forget his benefits of forgiveness, healing, death's rescue, and life's satisfaction? What do we say in response to such undeserved gifts? From the deepest part of our being, we declare, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget none of his benefits."
For additional resources or to view our TV program, log on to jashow.org. That's jashow.org.
This is Awesome Radio, WECU, 1570 AM, 107.5 FM.
We're back. You're listening to The Glenn Johnson Show. You can reach Glenn at glennjohnsonshow@gmail.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Glenn Johnson Show. Motivations with Glenn and Apostle Jacqueline Cullins Williams. We'll get to those 3 documents in a moment because this is our final 30 minutes of today's broadcast. So we have a lot more documents to get to, including domestic violence. And I think at this point, we'll have to do a part 2 because there's so much information, including the Veterans Administration and what's going on with veterans and domestic violence. But I think at Apostle Jacqueline, I'll invite Calvin Boston to the program next week because he does his show, Veteran Care Matter, with Dr. J, who's the Chief of Staff at the VA Center in Greenville. So maybe we'll invite him on to do the veterans part of the program next week.
Dr. Glenn, that would be absolutely great. I think it would be great to have a guest that could speak on the veterans part with domestic violence. We are also here. Dr. Glenn wanted us to talk about every child should be loved. And Dr. Glenn, I must say this, I have to add it in. Sometimes I don't get it in, but I'm getting it in today. I do have a few scriptures on children. And so a few things to see what the Word of God says concerning children.
We love to hear the Word of God.
I'm trying not to forget it every week. And sometimes the topic gets so interesting until I forget to bring it out, but I have it today.
Go ahead with your Word of God.
Okay, let's do a couple of scriptures on the Word. And I just want to talk to you and just tell you that Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it." And we know that scripture. So training up a child means to teach them and teach them the way that they should go, which means to help to direct their life. And if you haven't sought God to see about what way the child should go, you're not going to know how to train them or what direction to send them in. You have to ask God about the child's gifts. What is the child gifted with? Today in the classroom where I work, Dr. Glenn, one of our kids is gifted to know birthdays. And he knows absolutely everybody's birthday. All you have to do is tell him one time. And then if it's 3 weeks from then, he will repeat that birthday to you and say, your birthday is on this month and this year. Watching him, we discovered that he has this particular gift. So with your children, you have to watch them. Every child is gifted in some way, but you have to find out why and take an interest. What is your child good at? Your child might be a mathematician and you want him to be a basketball player. Not everybody's going to be a basketball player or an actor or something on TV, television, or something like that. Your child might be good at building things. He might be a construction worker. He might be a foreman. He might be a plumber. Find out what the child is good at. Them throwing that toy in the toilet and stopping it up might be an interest in being a plumber, Dr. Glenn.
It could be, yeah.
So you got to find out what it is and find out what your child is interested in and train them up in the way that they should go.
Because if the child doesn't realize they're being set up, which is a lot of word, a lot of people afraid or stay away from being set up, particularly in law enforcement. That's a word that they don't want to hear at all. But your parents are setting you up. They are setting you up for success. So yes, you have been set up.
And a lot of times, the things that you're led to do with your kids, the kid doesn't see that it's going to be do them some good. I know myself, and I am going to tell you about those cousins, Dr. Glenn. I forgot to say it. I was going to tell you what happened with my cousins, but I was being trained up to take care of other people, and I work in the care field always. Always, I'm designed better to work in taking care of other people and looking after other people. So I owned my own daycare and those type of things because I was good at looking after other people. And my mother, she started me from a little child. I had to babysit from the time I was a little child, and I became very good at it. So, train them up in the way that they should go. Look and see what they are supposed to be doing and ask God to help you with what you need to develop with your child.
And I think I had mentioned this before. When I graduated high school, I still remember this to this day. My mom asked me, well, what am I going to do? I came home, there was Army brochures and applications on my pillow. I said, yeah, but I want to be in law enforcement or firefighter. And she always asked me, why you want to be a firefighter or be a police officer? I said, because you know me, I like helping people. But if I'd have followed the path of my grandfather became a minister, that is still a form of helping people. So I could have did that. Now that I think about it.
Definitely. And, I just found out a couple of weeks ago that my mother took my brother and a couple of the cousins and even my ex that I married, or my ex-husband, she took them to the recruiter station. And my brother said to me, I wish I had signed up back then. He said he wished he had went in. And I'm sure some of the others wish they had went. She took them so they could sign up for the military, and some of them didn't do it. So, it's good to, but I remember, it's my brother said this, I thought about it. Why did she never take me? She never took me down to the military place, but she took them. So, train them up in the way they should go.
She probably had in the back of her mind that you was going to marry a military person.
Yes, or I also was sickly. So she probably felt, this is girl, so I'm not going to take her. But I'm thinking, why did she never take me? I should have went too.
But, like you said back in the day, probably your mom didn't think about that as far as a female was concerned.
Oh, yeah. And
It's
ideals were different about women than it is.
They had other aspirations for females.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And so we want to get into some of our documents here, but I want to tell this story real quick, Dr. Glenn. So my cousins, they called me. Now, I didn't pursue them. They called me. And they said, we want to go to this dance. So let's not tell our parents about our report cards. So apparently they had a bad report card, and I know I had one. And I was in 9th grade at the time. So they said, well, let's hold back the report card and tell them, after a certain day. Well, they never told me what day that we were given the report card. So I just thought that we were all on the same page and didn't give our report cards. So it's like months later, and my mother's on the phone talking to their mother, and their mother, my aunt says to her, and they brought in these bad report cards. And my mother says, what report card? And then so she said, yeah, they got the report card like 2.5 weeks ago. And my mother said, what? This girl ain't brought no report. She hasn't brought any report card in here. And so I'm like, what? And I'm thinking, they done gave their parent the report card and didn't tell me. But they asked me to hold the report card out so they wouldn't get in trouble. I didn't have a problem. I was going to get in trouble no matter what, but they wanted to go to a dance. And so I remember my mother calling me and making me get that report card, and she tore me up because my report card was really bad.
But I tell you what, after that beat down that my mom gave me, when that lady delivered that letter to the door, I became the best student there was in school. I remember going to school either the next day or the day after that, and it was math class. And the teacher was trying to talk. Everybody was talking and laughing and joking around. I remember I stood up in the middle of the classroom and said, hey, everybody, you see the teacher's trying to talk. Why don't everybody remain silent and let him get his message out? I was the best student there was in the school system.
Dr. Glenn, Ephesians 6:4 says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in discipline and instruction of the Lord. So it says don't provoke them to anger. That means don't beat them to death. Sometimes people, they go too far with things. It's okay to protect the child, but it's something else to control the child and demean them, or to, be abusive to a child and neglectful to a child. That's way out. It's too far.
And that's why, like these days, there's all kinds of systems in place to protect the child, such as CPS. We have a document on DHS and CPS. CPS, for all those who don't know, Child Protective Services. And that child was protected. And not like when I grew up, we had the rotary phones. Even if you wanted to dial 911, it took a long time for the thing to come back to get to the 9 and get to the 1. But now, since they have touch dial, it doesn't take that long to dial 911. So these days, you can call and report your parent if you suspect neglect or abuse.
Definitely. You can call, and if you do suspect neglect or abuse, now make sure that you're not just, doing something out. Ask questions, you know what I mean? Especially if a child comes to you. And, a lot of them will say, don't question them, but I need to know, because sometimes kids can be very manipulative too. And I saw this in myself even last week. They could say things and make it sound a certain way when they're not being abused or neglect. They just want you to react.
They just want you to react. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
But ladies and gentlemen, this is Awesome Radio, WECU, 1570 AM, 107.5 FM. Back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen.
Keep it locked right here to the Glenn Johnson Show.
Do you have questions about God's character? What he's like? Is he angry? Can he be trusted? Does he really love me? When you're struggling with who God really is, understand, therefore, that the Lord your God is indeed God. He is the faithful God who keeps his covenant for 1,000 generations and lavishes his unfailing love on those who love him and obey his commands. Growing your faith with Deuteronomy 7:9.
Awesome Radio Network, WECU, 1570 AM and 107.5 FM.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Glenn Johnson Show. Here on Awesome Radio, 107.5 FM and 1570 AM, WECU. We are continuing our topic of discussion because we have reached our final 20 minutes. And I want to ask my co-hosts if we would like to do a little bit more on the child neglect, child abuse. Then we'll conclude with the domestic violence itself. And we have mentioned inviting Mr. Calvin Boston Illinois, since he's a vet and works with us here at the radio station with his show, Veteran Care Matters with Dr. J, the chief of staff at the VA Center in Greenville. So we'll do that next week. We can probably have that part too. So we'll finish up with the child documents, and then a little bit on domestic violence.
Yes. Dr. Glenn, we wanted to say that one of the hardest to see abuse on also, or that they're being abused or neglected, are children who are quiet and non-disruptive, well-behaved children. Those are the hardest to spot or see that there's neglect going on, because usually that child that is well behaved, people don't really pay as much attention to the warning signs or some signs, and they may not show signs of abuse. Everybody doesn't just act out when they're being abused. A lot of times, kids in abusive homes, they can be very, very rowdy, and they can have very bad behavior or disruptive behavior, but there are kids that are in abusive homes and abusive situations, and they are well behaved. Those are the hardest to spot. The ones that are quiet, that are well mannered, that always obey the rules, and definitely those kids can be being abused behind the scenes. Dr. Glenn, what do you think on that?
I think that is absolutely true, because children don't develop just like what they develop, but not in the way that adults develop, because the human body itself develops quite differently between an adolescent and being an adult male or female.
And some kids, Dr. Glenn, they're just absolutely afraid to say anything. And so if there's any kids that are listening to us, and believe it or not, Dr. Glenn, there's a few kids that listen to us. One young lady told me, she said, I saw you were at my aunt's house on the TV. So there could be kids around that are listening. If they have something they need to say, they're being abused, they're being touched in the wrong way, they need to tell somebody. But there are kids that are too afraid to tell. They won't say anything. Even asked directly, they still will not release it or say it.
Yeah. And that's why I mentioned children and brain injury. You know, that plays an important role. If you're abusing a child, that child could end up with brain injury or brain damage just from being jolted around, pushed around, shoved around. Ultimately could lead into what they call shaken baby syndrome. And that affects that child for the rest of their life because the child's brain doesn't develop in a way that an adult brain develops.
Definitely. So, Dr. Glenn, I'm gonna read off just a few types of neglect here.
Yes.
And some of the types of neglect. Neglect can be a lot of things, which can make it hard to spot. When it's physical abuse, you'll usually see signs on the body and different things. And sexual abuse is another one that it can be hard to tell that a child is being sexually abused. But here are some signs, 4 types of neglect. Physical neglect. And that's neglecting a child's basic needs such as food, clothing, or shelter are not met, and they aren't properly supervised or kept safe. And those are the type of kids you see roaming the neighborhood. You know, their clothes are not being kept clean. They're not being fed. Their bodies are not being kept clean. Those are some signs that you could tell that a child is suffering neglect. And physical neglect. Educational neglect, that the parents don't send them to school. They don't care about their education. They don't care about their grades. They're not trying to help them or promote them to learn or do anything. Teacher calls, you kind of get the same response that they don't care, So there's educational neglect, and they don't always get the kids up to go to school. They don't always look after the kids or make sure that the kids are going to school. Also, emotional neglect. It is a child doesn't get the nurturing and stimulation they need. This could be through ignoring them, humiliating, intimidating, or isolating them. Emotional neglect is one of the ones that is very, very hard, and it is often internalized, Dr. Glenn. Those are the type of things that people end up being adults and they have to get therapy for, or they have to now, try to unwind or undo the damage that was done to them. Also, medical neglect. Medical neglect means that a child isn't given proper health care. This includes dental care or refusing or ignoring medical recommendations. So we want to also, that place with the recommendations can be a place where things can get to be, where it can be a gray area. But we want to talk about those that are absolutely refusing to get the child care. If you see that the child is sick or they have a fever for days and you don't get it, the child is losing weight and you don't know why, and the child is eating, you have to find out what is wrong with the child. Take them to doctor visits, take them for checkups, even for their mouth and their dental care. To see kids and their teeth are all rotten,
right.
Especially when they have access to dental care or especially to free medical and dental care, those kids should be going to the doctor and they should be going to the dentist.
And all those are quite relevant to signs of child neglect, child abuse. That's like you said, their teeth not clean, they're looking all raggedy and scraggly, have rashes and sores all over their body. That is very, very serious. But Jackie, we have 3 minutes to go for this segment, then we'll be back for our final 10 minutes. So let's get into the help is available documents, because I'm pretty sure everybody needs help.
Definitely.
Because we definitely have to do a part 2 next week.
Well, definitely. And this one could go more than once, Dr. Glenn. We barely scratched the surface of some of the things we need to say here. But we want to talk about Pitt County Social Services, and especially in this area, so that if you need to go and talk to somebody or report child abuse, or you suspect abuse or neglect, I'm going to tell you, Dr. Glenn, sometimes kids come up missing and nobody even reported that they didn't see the kid anymore. The kid is just gone. They drop out of school, the child is gone.
And nobody knows what happened.
Nobody knows what happened. Nobody even asks about what happened to the child. So, it is okay to ask questions and get involved. So to report child abuse or exploitation, to make a report of child or adult abuse or exploitation, please call 252-902-1110. And we didn't talk about trafficking, child trafficking, because that, from what I understood, I think that I saw something, Dr. Glenn, that said that North Carolina was high in child trafficking.
Yeah.
That is very high on the list in child trafficking.
And I think we do have a document on that. And we have another document on North Carolina, child neglect, child abuse rising at our alarming rate. If we don't have time to get to that document today, we will definitely get to it next week.
So this says to report incidents of abuse or neglect after normal operating hours, and this is talking about Pitt County Social Services, 252-830-4141. It says your call will be answered by the Pitt County Sheriff Department, and you should ask for the social worker on call.
Right. And those are very important numbers. So if you don't have time to write it down, like I said, please don't hesitate to email me at glennjohnsonshow@gmail.com. That's Glenn with 2 N's, GLENN, Johnson Show @gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to forward the documents to you. We have 50 seconds to go before we go to the next break. We'll be back with our final 10 minutes. Jackie.
Yes, also the Pitt County Department of Social Services One Church, One Child program. And that is a program that is dealing with helping strengthening the bonds with foster children. And so that is a big one too, to see, foster kids that have been removed from abusive situations. This is a great program. It's support for foster parents and for adoptive parents. Dr. Glenn, we're getting ready to go out to our next break. This is Awesome Radio, 107.5 FM and 1570 AM on your dial. We'll see you right back here in a few minutes. Dr. Glenn?
Yeah, I was looking at that document that you mentioned, and that has some very, very good information. We'll talk about that further. Back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Glenn Johnson Show, Motivations with Glenn.
180 over 111, and I had a stroke. I couldn't speak or walk.
150 over 90, and I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure sounds like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from silent. Get back on your treatment plan or talk with your doctor to create a plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
Head to toe, everything's changed.
Brought to you by the American Stroke Association, American Medical Association, and the Ad Council.
The moon is on average 239,000 miles from Earth. It's just over a quarter the size of the Earth, and compared to its host planet, it is the largest proportionally of all of the moons in the solar system. Because of its size, the gravity of the moon creates tides, which help to circulate the warm and cold waters of the ocean. How did scientists originally determine the shape of the Earth? Lunar eclipses occur as the Earth passes between the sun and moon, giving us the opportunity to see the shadow of the spherical Earth cast on the moon. We can learn a lot by studying God's creation. There's no doubt that the moon is a unique object, carefully designed and created on the fourth day as a great light to rule the night. A calendar in the heavens for signs, seasons, days, and years. I'm David Reeves. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
For more information, visit David Reeves Ministries at davidreeves.com. DavidRives.com.
My name is Jayla, and you're to see to my papa, Glenn Johnson, on the radio.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Glenn Johnson Show here on Awesome Radio, WECU, 1570 AM and 107.5 FM, Winterville, North Carolina, Awesome Radio Network. And I was just thinking about something, Apostle. So, like you said, we're not going to have enough time to get to all these documents, but I would like to get more information on how people get help. And then I thought about inviting one of the people from the domestic violence agency here in North Carolina, or Pitt County rather. That was on my show before. So if we get one of them to come on with Calvin next week, I'll try to make that happen. But of course, that is all subject to Miss Akila's approval.
Definitely. And we were talking about here before we went off a program that is supporting foster parents and adoptive parents. And I just want to say to you that if you have it room in your heart, become a foster parent. I was a foster parent years ago, and I fostered, quite a few kids, even some that I fell in love with and wanted to keep. So it is a great job, and it takes a very special heart to take in kids and become a foster parent to them. But it is a great rewarding job, very rewarding. The kids never forget you, and you never forget them. And giving them a safe place is something to be very proud of. A lot of people, they don't have the room for it. They just don't have, the heart or the mindset to take care of somebody else's kids or help kids to heal that have been, in abusive situations. But, having a house that is a safe place is a very powerful thing. And kids need it nowadays. And I also saw an advertisement saying that they're in need of foster parents here in Pitt County. Dr. Glenn?
I would just add to that, and this doesn't apply to everybody. If you do consider adoption or foster care, just don't be one of those people just looking as a means to collect a check.
Well, listen, Dr. Glenn, that check ain't all that now. Now, it's something, but it's not going to make you rich.
Yeah, but
you can't live off that.
But some people, some people don't know that, and they do it just to collect a check.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess if you have a certain mindset, then that's what it's going to be. But I'm just telling you, you're not getting rich off of it. And especially depending on how they give and what you have to buy, especially when it's a baby. You know how expensive diapers and milk and stuff is.
Yeah.
There are things that you're not going to come out on top with.
I only wanted to say that because, at my mind, the child is more concerning and more deserving than you collecting a check.
Oh yeah.
So if you're one of those people, please exclude yourself from that.
Well, you know how expensive things are, Dr. Glenn, right now? Do you know how expensive it is just taking care of your family without, doing or inviting or having another child or taking care of a foster child? I'm telling you, Dr. Glenn, I'm saying it again, you're not going to get rich. Things are expensive and it costs, and you're not going to, it's not anything to, you got to have a heart for it and something to make a difference, because if it's money that you're looking for, you're not gonna be overflowed with that in these particular systems.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. Just like you just mentioned, you have to have a heart for it. You have to be wanting to care for that child, raise that child in the most appropriate manner.
Definitely, and be there for them and to support them and look after them. And it's just like you're taking care of your own children a lot of times. So we're also seeing here, Dr. Glenn, next week you're going to invite our guests, and you will let us know at that time that we will have our guests on. Did you say it was a domestic violence, or are you looking for a military guest? Dr. Glenn, just clarify
Well,
for our listeners.
Yeah, I was thinking about having Mr. Calvin Boston Hill on to talk about the VA aspect of domestic violence. And the other person would be one of the representatives from the Domestic Violence Agency here in Pitt County.
Yes, our document that says every child needs love. I am looking at it right now, or looking for it. It says every child deserves to be loved, cared for, and protected. But 1 in 10 children have experienced neglect. That's why we've got advice on the types and signs of neglect and what you can do if you're worried about a child. That's one thing, to have a heart for a child. It says contact our helpline by calling 800, it says 808-800-5000, or emailing help@nspcc.org.uk. And so there's ways to find out more information about neglect on that particular website.
Yeah, and the last part you meant was UK. So that was a document that was created somewhere in the United Kingdom, Great Britain.
Oh yeah, definitely. But it has some good information on here.
Yeah, it's still relative to child neglect, child abuse, so you can pick up some valuable points and tips.
If a child reveals abuse to you, you need to report that. You need to not try to decipher it, but a child is telling you that they're being beaten, not being fed, they're not being taken care of, they're being left out, or they're being, harmed with words, physically, sexually, or even being trafficked in any way. You need to report that right away. It's not for you to decide what is abuse and what is not abuse.
And I would just like to make one other comment or statement before we go off the air. Like I said, please email me at glennjohnsonshow@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to forward some of the documents to you, particularly if you have a particular question or comment. That way you can review the documents for our broadcast next week. Jackie?
Definitely. And I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of what abuse is. It is physical injury that doesn't happen by accident. It means that this has been purposely
done. Yeah.
Yes, so it's not an accident. So now we're not calling to report accidents unless there's neglect from taking care of the accident. But it means that it's inflicted, it's purposely.
Yeah.
Yes, purposely. So we don't want to, talk about or people get that confused. Children can get injured in different ways and it not be an accident. But if it's an accident, sometimes, they can get hit by accident. Dr. Glenn and the child will say that. My grandbaby, one of them, before she was 2, could talk very well. And I came down to see her. She kept telling me, she said, that her uncle had hit her on the head. And so I stalked it down, Dr. Glenn. I asked everybody because she kept telling me, this uncle, and she kept saying his name, hit me on the head. And they kept telling me, no, that didn't happen. She's little, trying to say that she's making it up if she doesn't know what she's saying. But it happened, Dr. Glenn. She kept telling me. So I stalked everybody. And I wait till I saw that uncle and I said, my grandbaby says you hit her on the head. He didn't know what it was.
Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you're home and you allow a child to run around and play around in the house. That child falls and get injured. Do you think that's the responsibility of the parent?
It depends on if the child is not being supervised, depending on what kind of injury. The kids shouldn't be running in and out and you don't know that they're outside. I just saw a video the other day of a child that gotten outside and it was a little one, under 2, and gotten in the pool. Those type of things need to be locked up so the kid can't get to it. The child was under the water. That was the parent's responsibility.
And that's why I asked that question, because I think it would be the parent or adult's responsibility who's at that location at the time the child gets injured, because they could say that child wasn't properly supervised or monitored.
Right. So my grandbaby, Dr. Glenn, just to finish that, when I interrogated everybody, they kept saying it didn't happen, that he never hit her. He's a great person, this, that, and that other. He actually hit her by accident. His guitar bopped her on the head, and everybody saw it, and it happened. But in the child's mind, she felt like she had been hit. And maybe they didn't give it the attention that she thought she should have, but she kept telling me that she had been hit. And then I had to tell him, I said, see, the child had been hit. She was telling me the truth.
That's right.
So, listen to a child. They know, especially when they're little ones.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in today for this very important topic. As I said previously, we definitely didn't have enough time to cover it all. So please join us next week for part 2. We have to have a lot more relative information for you. I will let Jackie close it out at this time.
Yes, I would just want to say to you today again, and just reiterate, as we've said several times, and I keep saying it over and over again, a child is a precious gift. If you think that a child is being abused, or if you're a child yourself and you know that you're being abused, tell somebody. Go and call the authorities. Call the police and report it. And we're going to ask that you come back with us on next week, and we'll continue this topic. Dr. Glenn?
I want to thank everybody once again for tuning in today to the Glenn Johnson Show, Motivation with Glenn, here on Awesome Radio. Join us next week, WECU. So long, everybody.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.